Thankfully, there's a couple of good things in the horizon. 8,000 realtors descended upon Congress, so VA loans can now use buyer agency or broker fees within that.
People actually get on social media and don't like things that we've said. That doesn't happen.
It's very difficult when people get elected to office and they don't understand what it is to be an advocate of homeownership. We've supported people that end up being nothing like what they said
Right.
on their interviews because they told us the right things.
Welcome, everyone, to our June issue of the Policy Pulse podcast. I'm Weldon Shaver, and I'm here with Dr. Clarissa Thomas. And we hope you enjoyed today's podcast about some of the issues and legislation and things that are going on in the political arena. So, what would you like to talk about first?
Boy, good morning. Greetings, everyone. Well, thankfully, there's a couple of good things in the horizon. The legislative session obviously wrapped up a month ago, and I think we talked about that. Some of the things that we didn't like didn't make it through, as well as some of the things that we did like and obviously didn't make it through. And we talked about this last month, the construction defects, but we're still at the table. I know our coalition partners in the housing space are all still working and looking to find a broader reach for folks to bring it back during the next legislative cycle. We continue to work on something, and we understand that policy is obviously incremental. And so the policy making process that is. And so we will continue to focus on the construction defects litigation reform space. But obviously on good news for us is we mentioned it the last month on our VA. This was one of our biggest pitches when we were on the Hill last month. 8,000 realtors descended upon Congress, and we had lots of meetings and talks with, the regulatory agencies, the VA, members of Congress. And obviously, there was a need to address what is an unintended consequence, and that was pretty much shutting out our VA consumer, our military members, from their ability of purchasing a home. And so we have gotten good word this week that there's been a temporary suspension or however we want to call that.
Amendment,
Yeah.
something, yeah.
And on this policy that allows the VA to be able to allow for members of the military that when they're purchasing a home, they're at equal playing field with a regular consumer. And so VA loans can now use, they can actually use buyer agency or broker fees within that
Yes.
within that space that they have. And so that's very promising. And obviously our National Association of Realtors is very excited that, our advocacy voice was heard loud and clear. And while temporary, I think we hope that this will be something that we can continue to advocate for, protect our members of the military, and ensure that they have equal representation and purchasing power at the table.
Yeah, and when we met with Congressman Lamborn, he was very interested in it and was able to hopefully drive the bus a little bit to get that reform taken care of. Plus, we were able to educate, Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper about the need for this, and
Right.
they were also very concerned that the VA buyer needed to be taken
Right.
care of and needed to be on an even playing field with regular
Right,
consumer.
because
and they
Colorado
weren't.
has such a big military presence,
Yes.
and so it is a concern. It's not a partisan issue. This is a statewide issue, and obviously it affects members of the military nationwide. And I think that this is why you see this policy pause, that unintended consequences were going to lead, to very dire consequences for this sector of the community or communities that give so much, put their lives at stake, to protect our freedoms, and they're at a disadvantage when it comes to purchasing power.
Right.
So,
Yep.
so that's an exciting note. I think that in politics we will take our small victories, but I do think that this is a considerable victory. For now, again, it's a temporary rule, but it's a big one. And so we want to go into this heavy duty election cycle because we have local, presidential. We want to go into this 2025 year with a good note, and making sure that we continue to advance the dream of homeownership, protecting private property rights, and ensuring housing opportunities for all, especially in June during, homeownership month.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's important. So yeah,
Right.
that's a good development. We have current primaries right now going on locally in the state. So
Right.
there's a lot of different races. So hopefully everyone has received their ballots. They've noticed the information that's coming out from our Colorado Association of Realtors as well as their local
Right.
associations about who they're endorsing or recommending, who are also realtor champions for
Right.
us. So, do you want to talk anything
Sure. I
about
mean, and,
that?
and for us, Realtor Champion is as simple as it's individuals that when we're determining or analyzing their voting records, if they are elected officials or if they've never run for office, it's individuals that have a very deep sense of what private property rights are, the protection of private property rights, the advocacy of home ownership, and making sure that they understand what that housing space is. It's very difficult when people get elected to office and they don't understand what it is to be an advocate of home ownership. And we're seeing that being chipped away at the state level. And so it's incumbent upon our industry to make sure that these folks are educated. And I
Mhm.
think that that's why it's so valuable. There are so many good people running for office. And it's not just to say for us, we're concerned with, again, advancing private property rights, protecting them, and advancing the dream of homeownership. And so when I say that, it's that is what we focus on. We could look at candidates from a different lens, but when we make our determination of who gets our nod and our support, it's the people that thoroughly are vested in making sure that they know what we do, that will seek a partnership or collaboration,
Right.
that they know that realtors are the advocates of homeowners, and that they are also willing to. I mean, forget the collaboration, right? It's that partnership. It's always relying on us as the voice of that consumer. And so we could support other people, but we focus and narrowly focus those that advance and champion private property rights. And so we take hits on that sometimes, and, some people get their feathers ruffled.
Hmm.
But again, we are very narrowed on our focus and how we select the people that we choose to endorse. And so in our local commissioner races, we have District 2, 3, and 4 are the open seats. So for District 2, we are supporting. Come again, I'm trying to think what District 2 is.
It's not Geithner, is it? Is that Kerry Geithner?
Yes, actually, Commissioner Geithner is
Hmm.
District 2.
Hmm.
And then I was like, well, I'm looking at the map, visually, the map of El Paso County. And then District 3, we are supporting uh, Don Wilson. And in District 4, we're supporting Brenda Delgado Miller. And so those are the three folks within those commissioner races. And then for district attorney, we've actually enjoyed a very good relationship
Yes,
with
Michael
Michael
Allen.
Allen, who's the current district attorney. And so he has been a very good steward of our judicial interest for the 4th Judicial
Yes.
District, which is El Paso and Teller County. And so we've enjoyed, like I said, that relationship since he's been in office. And has gone above and beyond to ensure that our communities are in a safe predicament, and that is so important to creating and advancing a high quality of life, which we're very vested in. And so for us, that was pretty much a no-brainer. It's a good partnership, it's a good collaborative environment. He focuses on making sure that our communities are safe,
Hmm.
and so those are the folks that we focused on.
Right.
Our state association is obviously, they play in the state space, which is state house, state senate seats. And one of those champions of realtor assets or realtor voice is Senator Larry Liston. So I know our state association is very vested in that Senate district. And I'm trying to think, who else are they?
The District 20, but I can't remember the person's name that was up there. I didn't sit in on those interviews,
Oh,
but
I was gonna say, yeah, it's again one of those states. It's Jarvis, I believe,
yeah, I
is his
think
name.
that sounds
And
right.
so that's the House District 20 seat. And so again, it's from the lens of advocates of homeownership, folks that advance that private property rights mantle. And so we'll see how these battles shake off and shake out.
Yes.
And so people have until the election is June
Ju-
25th ballots must be dropped. Whether you mail it, it has to be mailed. I would say give it a week because we can't really rely on the Postal Service to
Right.
be um, expedient. So I'd say I'd encourage people to drop their ballots
Yeah.
as opposed to mailing them. There's many voter precinct centers with the VSPCs, the voter service precinct centers, polling centers. I'm sorry. I would even encourage people that if you're not comfortable, voting a ballot by mail, show up. You obviously surrender your ballot. You voted there, and it makes the process a lot easier for everyone, and that ensures that your ballot will be counted in a timely fashion. I mean, we've heard all sorts of nightmare stories around the country. The ballots are still being counted and processed like 2 weeks after an election date, and
Yeah.
it has to be postmarked. And I know that there's all sorts of crazy and kooky rules here and there, but your ballot needs to be in, postmarked, and counted by 7 p.m. I mean, and again, Colorado
Yeah.
is we run a little bit different of a ship because we've been doing vote by mail for years. But for the safety and ensuring your ballot is counted, drop it off. Don't mail it at
Yep.
7 p.m. on the 25th.
Yep.
That's too late. You have to have your ballot already in.
Yeah.
So I
So,
can't emphasize that
yeah,
enough.
I agree. I agree. I dropped mine off just Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's when I
Um,
voted too.
being on the committee that sits and does these interviews, I will say that the other thing we always try to express to whoever we interview is that we want to be a resource for them.
Right.
We want to be the resource for their questions about real estate, private property rights, rental properties, the laws
Right.
that affect our industry. And then we try to have that dialogue with them to know that they can call us
Exactly.
and we're going to reach out to them if we are concerned about certain types of legislation. And so that we have that relationship that you talked
Right.
about.
And
Because
it's
that's
about
really important.
accountability too.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
I mean,
important.
it's because you don't want to be supporting people. This is I would say that this is one of those behind the scenes steps that you don't want to support somebody and have that support, you know, go by the wayside. You want to be able to hold elected officials accountable. And this is where that accountability comes in. And I know that, we're all special interest to a certain extent, but we are the special interest for the homeowner. And most people don't understand that realtors are those advocates that are helping the consumer, the people that own a house. We work in partnership with the housing and building association, with the
Mm-hmm.
apartment association.
Yep.
We are collaborating to ensure that housing continuum voice, that if somebody wants, rent, that are more affordable, things like that, we all work to try to find those solutions. And part of it is, that pinch that's been created because of the supply and demand issues. And so realtors are not just on, hey, we're going to sell a house. We work with, a collaborative environment of
Yeah.
individuals that are trying to help others, like I said, in this continuum of housing, whether it's renting a home and then progressing and transitioning over to your first home, then going from your first home to, a little bit larger property, or obviously with the interest rates being a little bit high, it's a little bit tough because it's created a bottleneck
Yeah.
for people to be able to move
Mhm.
and downsize.
Right.
And so these are all the things that we work on, and this is why it's important that we work with those elected officials that we support, and then it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we, it's not nipping them at their heels, but it's having that continued dialogue to ensure that they know what it is that we're looking for, because they don't have a black ball, right? They're not going to just magically, say, oh, this is what the realtors are thinking. We have to make sure that we're on it and always educating them. And if we even tweak our mindset or our policy approach on something, we have to make sure that we educate our legislators and those seeking elected office and what it is that we're trying to advance and advocate for.
Yeah, yeah, it's very important. So, speaking of ballots and elections and so forth, you and I
Mhm.
were looking at the Secretary of State site before we started this podcast, and we were looking at some of the ballot initiatives that are being proposed for this coming November. It's not quite 1 million like Dr. Evil wanted to get, but it's a lot. So, is there
Right.
any in particular you want to maybe talk about?
Yeah, so there's one. I mean, right now it's number 50. That's what it's billed as. It's gotten approval. I think it's one of two initiatives that's actually gotten approval to be on the ballot for November. Obviously, circulating petitions or gathering their actual signatures. So that number will be a little bit different when the ballot rolls out. But this particular initiative caps the amount that the state and obviously local municipalities so this is for property taxation purposes
Hmm.
at 4% give and take, right? And so there's a lot of consternation with school districts and some other folks that rely on those mill levies, those mills, to
Hmm.
be able to do, even special districts to be able to do their funding appropriations, if I can say that. And so it'll be interesting to see where this initiative actually lands on who's supporting it, who's
Right.
opposing
Yeah.
it, because it does cap and it actually limits anything regarding uh, property taxation. It's going to pretty much force a single subject because there's been a lot of stuff that's circulated in Colorado in the past few years that dances around that single subject notion. And we do constitutionally have the single subject,
Yep.
but we've seen it at the legislature.
Hmm.
They get around a single subject because they're like, well, that's really not a single subject. It can talk about that too. And it's like, but then you're addressing two different things.
Right.
So it's really not a single subject. And
Hmm.
so this is really going to hold not only the state accountable the way that it's written, but it's going to hold local governments, school districts very much tightly construed in how they go about accessing excess revenue, requesting excess money to for their pet projects or their
Right.
local
Hmm.
capital improvement projects, things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what this plays out come November because it is, like I said, one of two that has gotten the nod. There's multiple initiatives that are competing, as we saw from the same party, the Independence Institute, is looking at uh, pretty much reducing state personal income tax. And so how that plays out, what does fly, what doesn't fly, because it's not cheap to get anything titled.
Right.
And I say it's not cheap because it's one thing to go through the state process to get an initiative vetted through the state titling authority, but it's actually gathering those signatures. And it's people complain, they're like, oh, this is not democratic. It's like, well, it's really expensive.
Yeah.
So any initiative at this day and age, it's like the labor market rate, right? You're having to pay a minimum wage for signature gatherers. People bemoan that. Well, that's not constitutional. When people consider that not constitutional is kind of ridiculous
Hmm.
because it's fair game and that sector is actually employing a lot of people. I may not like a lot of initiatives that end up getting titled, but you know what? It's the way that our state constitution is
Right.
set up.
Right.
And so if people have the money and they're able to raise the revenues necessary for them to be able to hire the signature gatherers,
Yes.
do all this other
Hmm.
stuff, it's like, wow. I mean, it's not cheap.
Yep.
It's definitely not cheap. And this is why we see how blurry our political and citizen initiative processes in Colorado. And it wasn't like, I mean, it was a lot easier. And this is why
Yep.
we see how convoluted it's become. But we will continue to be monitoring this. August 11th or 12th, I think, is their deadline. And so by the time that we get around to late, like middle of summer, we will know what's on the ballot, what's not. And it's going to be a busy election
Yes.
cycle because obviously we have a presidential election. We've got everything from the top ticket all the way
Mhm.
to
Yep. State
the
races.
state
Hmm.
races, local
Local.
level,
Hmm.
and multiple issues. And that doesn't include our local and like our
Right.
local issues
Right.
and special district issues. So it's going to be a busy ballot. And we've said it. I know you've talked about, hey, get your cup of coffee and sit and pull out your
Or a bottle of whiskey. Hmm.
so it'll be tough. I mean, I discern wisely, folks.
Yeah, it's going to be real entertaining. So our meetings coming up will probably be pretty
Right.
lively, going throughout the rest of the year until
Right.
election happens. So
And then we will be hearing from a lot of the proponents for the different initiatives, asking for support. Mostly they'll be targeting our state association because obviously that's where, all these coalitions. But if our state association engages in any of these initiatives that they feel will play a stake, whether it's an economic development or whether it's, protecting the integrity of the electoral process, things like that. I suspect, we will get a briefing, and we will be communicating with our
Right.
members about how this all plays out. But there's lots of different issues that will impact how Colorado does their electoral business, how, we do taxation, how we do, I mean, all this is on the ballot.
Right. And after these primaries are over, we'll
Right.
do interviews again for the candidates that get through the primaries to probably talk to some of them, I'm imagining.
Well, I believe that the state association will be
Oh,
playing in some of those. I mean, they didn't partake of interviews with many of the different districts, but they will do interviews for, once it's narrowed down to, just one candidate on the Republican and the Democrat
yeah.
side. Or
Okay. All right.
so.
Okay. All right. Well, it's going to be busy.
Yeah.
Anything else in particular you want to share with our listeners today?
No, I think that for the most part, I mean, we're very. It's not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think that we're pretty good stewards of, what we play in, how we get involved, and when we do get involved in the policy and the political process, it's because it's been thoroughly studied, analyzed, you name it. We're just not going to stick our neck out for things that we feel will end up dividing our membership unnecessarily. And so, especially, I mean, I go back to the candidate interviews. If you're upset about some of the candidates that we've supported, feel free to reach out to us. This is not a partisan approach. There in certain districts, there's only one party running, and the
Right.
bottom line is that you take a you take and make a decision on a partisan race because that is the candidate that will represent that area. When it comes to, like whether it's R's and D's running together, in one particular district, it's still a matter of who will better serve and better represent the realtor interest. And it's not just the realtor interest from, being able to make a living. It's the realtor interest as advocates of homeowners. So we are in essence studying and analyzing and endorsing candidates based on that big picture approach that they're going to be friendly and not overly regulating or promoting regulatory burdens
Mm-hmm.
on the business side of our industry. And at the same time, they're not going to be constricting and stripping away private property rights. So we are very diligent with the positions that we take. And I know we always get, some smack from people that don't like the candidates that we support because they have their partisan lens, but this is not about partisan politics. And whereas we might support, more Republicans here, Denver County supports more Democrats, Jefferson County more Democrats, Arapahoe County is a mixed bag, things like that. So it's always it's a microcosm of how we do everything. Everything is micro targeted in our political world, and
Mm-hmm.
it really is about us. And we have gotten egg on our face. We've supported
Oh,
people
yes.
that
Mm-hmm.
end up being nothing like what they said
Right.
on their interviews because they told us the right things. It really is, and this goes for everybody, not just for PPAR. This goes for every single association that's making candidate endorsements. It's we have to discern who the best realtor champions will be. And so if you don't like somebody with our candidate recommendations, reach out to us. You can email us, call us, and I'm happy to talk to folks, and I'm happy to be the punching bag whenever need
Yeah.
be. So
Yeah, be the scourge of their bane on the social media. People actually get on social media and don't like things that we've said. That doesn't happen. Come on. Well, it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna be busy.
mhm,
I think it's very important, as we discussed, that you get out, vote.
right,
You need to make your voice heard. You need to make your selections. It's important. We just celebrated the what was it, the 40th anniversary of D-Day? No, the 80th
80th
anniversary of
anniversary.
D-Day. And you know, those young men that fought in that war gave us these freedoms. So let's not take them lightly. Let's do our citizen duty and let's get out
Right,
and vote and make your voice heard and be involved. So,
that's right.
so that's I think our wrap for our June issue of the Policy Pulse podcast, and we hope you like us on Facebook and YouTube and wherever else you catch us. And we'll see you next month.